If you have ever driven on I-94 through St. Paul, you have traveled through an ugly chapter of the city's history.
When it was built, the highway ripped the heart out of the Twin Cities black community, scattering hundreds of families and shattering their hopes of achieving the American dream. In tonight's Voices for Change, Maury Glover takes a look at the Rondo neighborhood's past and efforts to revive it for the future.
In the heart of St. Paul, a stone's throw from the cathedral and the state capitol, there are reminders of a neighborhood that is gone but not forgotten. A once thriving oasis for black families, churches, and businesses that eventually paid the price for progress.
So this is the picture of 304 Rondo, and my grandpa had a sign on there called the Gospel Mission.
Nathaniel Kalik was raised by his grandparents in a house in the city's Rondo neighborhood.
You know, there was always someone there to help you along the way, and we felt very safe, very much loved. And even though racism was all around us, it didn't have the impact on us as young folks.
But his idyllic childhood was shattered when he was about 13 years old, and police forcibly evicted his 80-year-old grandfather, Reverend George Davis, and his blind grandmother, Bertha, from their home because they refused to evacuate to make room for the construction of Interstate 94.
Well, I cried, you know, because I was confused. It was a very traumatic experience, and I think in a way it's caused generational trauma, because one moment you're there, you're feeling safe, and everything that you think you need in life is, you know, it's right there, and the next thing you know, it's pretty much all gone.
From the beginning, the Rondo neighborhood, which was bordered by Lexington Avenue on the west, Rice Street on the east, University Avenue on the north, and Selby Avenue on the south, was a haven for people of color. At its peak from the 30s to the 50s, it had black-owned grocery stores, credit unions, and social clubs. And at one point, half the city's black population lived within its boundaries.
It was a place where people could find belonging, to find home, to find purpose. And as people migrated north, like my family did, it was a community that felt just like home, a place of love, of connectedness.
But when the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 provided funding to create a network of freeways across the country, the state decided to build a connection between downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. A proposed northern route along abandoned railroad tracks near Pierce Butler Road would have been less disruptive to neighborhoods, but a more central route right through the heart of Rondo was chosen.
I think it's a pattern that you see in many other cities as well. Oftentimes the African American community is seen as the path of least resistance, that there won't be that level of engagement to challenge a policy, to engage to make sure that it's the most equitable solution.
During construction from 1956 to 1968, Rondo lost 700 houses, 300 businesses, and the population declined by 61%. Many families didn't receive fair market value for their homes, and because of discriminatory housing practices like redlining and restrictive covenants, they had limited choices of where they could move.
We lost intergenerational wealth overnight as we lost our housing. We lost our businesses, probably only about a dozen African American owned businesses still in the Rondo community today, and imagine going to that from over 300.
I felt like the freeway was an unnecessary scar upon the Rondo community.
Marvin Anderson says his father built a dozen apartment homes with a group of railroad workers in Rondo, but they only received a fraction of what the buildings were worth when they were taken down.
It kind of shook his belief in the fairness of the system. And I think that was something that he took very hard, very personally, took it very hard. And I think it just kind of changed him.
Years later, Anderson co-founded the Rondo Days Festival to celebrate the spirit of the neighborhood and push for the creation of a commemorative plaza to honor its history. Now his group Reconnect Rondo has a plan to right a wrong and make up for some of the racial injustices of the past. They want to put a cap over a portion of I-94 and build a land bridge several blocks long with affordable housing, green space, a museum, and a marketplace that would re-link both sides of the neighborhood cut in half by the freeway and restore a community destroyed 60 years ago.
It would be a symbol or a model for the reconciliation and the rekindling that needs to happen in our greater society right now. People of all races can come together and live in the spirit of Rondo and an exuberance of joy. A little enclave community that's dedicated to the old spirit of Rondo, the safety, the haven of Rondo.
Isn't that beautiful?
Khalik says restoring Rondo won't be as easy as refurbishing the table his grandmother had in their old house in the neighborhood's cornmeal valley.
It will never, ever replace, what we had. The spirit, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the family, and community connections. But I think it's a start.
But maybe there's a way to build a bridge from Rondo's past to a better future.
The spirit of Rondo will always live on.
For Voices for Change, Maury Glover, Fox 9 News.